Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February 11th, 2025 City Council regular session meeting. I am now calling that meeting to order. You can view this on the city's YouTube channel where it's live streamed, also on the longmontpublicmedia.org/watch website, or on Comcast channels 8 or 880. Can we have the roll call, please, Dawn?
Absolutely. Mayor Peck?
Present.
Councilmember Christ?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring?
Here.
Councilmember McCoy?
Present.
Councilmember Popkin?
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Here.
Councilmember Yarbrough?
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a reminder to the public, in accordance with Council's rules of procedure, the rules for providing public comment are as follows. Only Longmont residents and employees of the City of Longmont may speak during first call, public invited to be heard. You must provide your address on the sign-up sheet outside before the meeting, or I'll not call your name. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and we would like your name and address, please. Anyone may speak on the second reading or public hearing items, and you're asked to add your name to the speaker list for that specific item before the meeting. Anyone may speak at final call, public invited to be heard. Members of the audience shall refrain from disruptive, vulgar, or abusive language, applause, heckling, or other actions that interfere with the orderly function of the council. Now we are at approval of the minutes. May I have a motion for the January 28th?
January 28th, 2025, as presented.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough to approve the January 28th minutes. Are there any corrections or discussion of these minutes? Seeing none, let's vote. And that carries unanimously. Do we have any agenda revisions, Dawn?
We have one more set of minutes, Mayor. Sorry, the February 4th.
Aha. Now may I have a motion for the February 4th minutes?
I'll move the February 4th regular session minutes.
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor Christ. Is there any discussion about these minutes? Seeing none, let's vote.
Oh, there it is. Waiting. I do approve, but.
Would you like to verbally vote?
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This passes unanimously.
Let's
Yeah.
see if that makes a difference.
Okay. Now, Dawn, are there any agenda revisions?
Mayor, we did have two items that were revisions. We added yesterday at midday the minutes for January 28th, and then we also added the legislative item that was inadvertently left off the agenda. So the agenda was revised yesterday midday.
Thank you very much. Now, are there any motions from councilors to add agenda items to future agendas? Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'd like to explore the appropriateness of creating, oops, it just went blank on there. The appropriateness of looking into and researching the possibility of protecting ourselves from any sort of liability or exposure associated with this group Doge that seems to be going into federal buildings and accessing information, shutting out members of Congress, and like to make sure that we don't have any sort of exposure where they find something and then use it against us, and I'd like to prepare ourselves for that. So I'd like us to
What is your
think about
motion?
a motion that, my motion would be to explore a ordinance on data protection and government accountability in regards to in regards to any possibility of our data being shared inappropriately. I've got an actual whole thing, but I think it's
Okay.
best that I sent this on to the city manager and the city attorney, but I think it's best that they look at the possibilities.
Let me see
this.
if we have a second. Is there a second for Councillor McCoy's motion?
I'll second it.
It's been seconded by Councillor Christ, made by Councillor McCoy, and I am going to ask you to concisely make that motion again.
Sure, okay.
Just-
So let me bring this down.
We have to make sure we know what this
Yeah,
motion
so
is.
motion to explore an ordinance on data protection and government accountability. My concern
Just,
for this
okay.
is to make sure that any of our data and any of our employees' data is protected.
Yeah, was Don able to capture the motion?
Did you got it?
Okay, okay.
Okay, so the motion was to explore an ordinance on data protection and govern accountability in regards to the possibility of data being shared inappropriately. And it was already been seconded, so calling on Councillor Popkin.
Yeah, thanks for raising this, Councilmember McCoy. A question for you and for others just to weigh in on this. Like, I think you were referring to current federal activities, if I understand correctly. And I'm just curious how federal data and federal privacy considerations kind of impact us at a local municipal level. So if you could just speak to that, that would be appreciated.
Councillor McCoy.
Thank you. Well, I'm concerned that 2 weeks ago we had a memorandum that from the president that said that all federal funding was going to be frozen, and then it got overturned, and then we've had weeks of this group coming in through different federal agencies looking at information, and it seems not to be very transparent, and I'm worried that maybe some ordinance that we passed or some sort of activity on that side of things that we might have received, federal grants for, could be, denied, or maybe even if we get something denied because of some sort of ordinance that we passed, or if we have our employees, their data has been shared with an inappropriate group, that we are covered, so that we actually get ahead of this thing and figure out how to make sure that our employees' privacy are considered. And so that's just my concern, that there's this chaos going on, and I'm concerned that we have maybe some exposure somewhere. Maybe one of our it might be so bad as that one of our bonding rating could be lowered in some way, and I don't want to see any sort of negative impact and lose any of the public trust because we waited until something happened to do something, and then we're kind of under this gun of trying to get it in this week and then the following week and everything else like that. If we start to look at what's happening, maybe we can actually get ahead of this and predict, or at least try to predict how to protect our citizens, our employees, their data, and our own government funding.
Okay, Councillor Christ.
Well, my question is for our city attorney and our city manager about, do we have any data protection protocols in place? And then where does being a home rule city fall into this in terms of data being shared? I think it's kind of at our discretion how we share our data now, but protocols would be important in that discussion. And I see Assistant City Manager Sandy Cedar coming down, and
So she's coming down.
Molly from the integration, strategic integration department. So, oh, I'm sorry, Becky.
So she's
I'm looking
coming
beyond
down.
her at Molly there.
The answer is yes. So, for example, I'll start with NextLight. So, even internally with NextLight, we do not give any information to any agency unless there is a court order to provide that information. And that's including our own internal police department. They have to have a warrant or some type of court order to get that information. Sandy can go over other data sources, and then I'll circle back into information that we actually have to upload into the system.
Can I interrupt for a point of order here just for a moment? This motion is for a future agenda. So I do not expect staff without any headway or preparation to come up and discuss this right now. That is the point of putting it on a future agenda, so they have time to prepare. Thank you. But to save yourself some fast accumulating information, and Counselor McCoy, would you, oh, okay. Counselor Christ.
Well, thank you all. And I just, I think it's important to ask this question at this juncture, but I think we may have protections in place, and that we, we are a home rule municipality, and I think that matters also. So just would like to see how that all fits together. But I was interested in exploring the question, so thank you for putting that forth, Councilor McCoy.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring.
Thank you, Mayor. Before moving on, so my question was very similar, and it sounds like we do have some kind of, we do have protections in place. In conversations I've had with you, Harold, we do have protections. My question is, would an ordinance is a move, adding this to an agenda item or exploring the possibility of adding an additional layer of protection, will that service any purpose, or will the action be redundant to what we already have?
So before we explore that, I'm going to interrupt for just a minute
Yes.
here. I would like to make a friendly amendment to your motion. Would you be open to directing staff to give us a presentation on what our protocols are, where we are in protecting our information as a future agenda item? Okay.
So, yeah, and I was just going to suggest, like, if you wanted to do a 2x2, just calling us in 2x2 to go over procedure rather than a whole blocking of, or a presentation is fine.
Yeah, I think a presentation would be good because I think we also get calls from residents
Yeah.
about data protection, and I think it would be valuable to do a brief presentation kind of talking about this issue.
Okay. So does that second hold for this amendment?
For adding it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Presentation,
Councilman Chris second.
she seconded it.
Yes.
Okay.
The presentation, yes.
Counselor Popkin.
Yeah, if you don't mind, it would help inform my vote on this. Actually, I would love to hear from Sandy if possible. Just like what, at a high level, I know we're not going into detail on like the data protection and privacy stuff right now, but just to know how we should even think about this in the context of where we're coming from. So just would love to hear from you briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. I think when you think about security, first of all, there is no such thing as 100% secure data. That we spend a lot of money trying to make sure that our data is secure, and we make sure that we're not sharing information with people that aren't authorized to see the information. But I think with the new changing landscape, it wouldn't be a bad idea for us to bring back that information to share with you and kind of look at it with that lens, which I don't think we have looked at it that way. We have always looked at kind of all hazards, threats types of planning. We do have cyber security insurance. We do have, all kinds of different protections and softwares, to be able to make sure that people can't get in. Sometimes our own employees can't get into their data because we're so secure around that. But I do think that this is a different lens that we can look at and bring back more information.
Yeah, thank you. It feels like this is just a different type of challenge than maybe has been considered in the past. And
I would agree.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councilor McCoy.
And that's exactly the purpose of this. The ever-changing landscape of this is just so chaotic that I just can't figure out, I just don't want to wait till it's right there, where the water's lapping at our chin to decide to do something about it.
Okay, that sounds great. Let's vote. And that passes 6-1 with Councilor Rodriguez opposing. Thank you. So we are now at the city manager's report.
No report, Mayor, Council.
We do have a special report. This is for FBLA. It is a proclamation. It's a proclamation designating February 9th through the 15th, 2025 as Future Business Leaders of America Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas Future Business Leaders of America, Inc., FBLA, is a nonprofit educational organization whose first chapter was established in Johnson City, Tennessee in 1942, and Iowa became FBLA's first state chapter in 1947. And whereas Longmont High School officially chartered its FBLA local chapter on December 4th, 1974, and whereas FBLA includes more than 20,000 members and advisors in 4,600 chapters nationwide in middle schools, high schools, colleges, universities, career and technical schools, and private business schools. And whereas FBLA is a professional business organization dedicated to bringing business and education together in a positive working relationship through innovative leadership and career development programs. And whereas FBLA members perform community service activities and strive to build a student's understanding of the realities of the modern business world. And whereas FBLA reaches middle school, high school, and college students' basic business and leadership principles and assists them in the transition from school to work. Now therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim the week of February the 9th through the 15th, 2025 as Future Business Leaders of America Week in Longmont, Colorado. And I see the FBLA students. So would you like to say something?
I just want to say thank you so much for approving our proclamation. You know, our chapter here at Longmont has worked very hard. We've had about 80 students qualify to compete at the state level, and we're very excited to, grow our chapter's development, and, your approval of this has made that possible. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And if you would like a picture with us, we will do that. Do you want to hand this to them? Sure. Shorter people in front?
Come on, Diane, you gotta get in front of me.
Well, I don't suggest it. Shorter. Don't even get there. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. Thank
Not me.
A little too cold for dressing up.
I know it.
Super cold when I left this morning, at least.
It was really cold.
Cold today.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm sorry, I don't know you.
I'm Jim Givens. I'm the business teacher at Longmont High School.
Oh, my kid's school. Nice. That's great. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Counselor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just wanted to say this is my 23rd year of being an advisor for Future Business Leaders of America. I'm the board director for District 2, which is all of St. Vrain, all of Boulder Valley, and Westminster, and Clare to schools that are up in Winter Park area. So the conference that Longmont High's advisor and I put on had 808 students and adults attending it. And Longmont High is the largest chapter in the state for the last 2 years, over 300 students. So they've really done a great job with their high schools of business and FBLA. So thank you for doing this.
Good job. We are now at first call, public invited to be heard. And remember, we would like your name and address. And the first person on the list is Mark Spencer. Number 2, she said, is, number 1 is,
Yeah. Mark Spencer is the principal. Yeah, turn it on.
All right, there we go. All of you should have these pictures on your in front of you. Good evening, Mayor Peck and council members. My name is Mark Spencer. I've lived in Longmont most of my life, graduating from Longmont High School in 1971, believe it or not. Wow. The University of Northern Colorado in 1975 with a degree in music education. I hold master's and doctoral degrees in biblical studies. I'm the senior pastor at Christ Church International, located at 527 Main Street. The church has been in Longmont since 1981. Our church and its related ministries have ministered throughout the communist Eastern Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and the Middle East. Currently, we have a Canadian-Israeli family in Israel connected with our ministry and many other Jewish connections throughout Israel. And as a Christian church, we celebrate many Jewish feasts and carry the people of God, of our Lord Jesus Christ, in our hearts. And it's with the rise of anti-Semitism across the country, we placed a sign in one of our windows with an Israeli flag on it with the words, "We stand with Israel." Unfortunately, Sunday morning, February 2nd, when I arrived at church to prepare for Sunday morning worship service, I was met with all that anti-Semitic graffiti that you see there, spray painted red on one of our windows, a door, the sidewalk, the building, our mailbox, and it was clearly intended to be threatening and intimidating, especially to our young families. You know, and as well as the hateful graffiti, we also found a pile of broken bricks stacked up on one of the picnic tables we have in the front of our building. And whether the bricks were there intended to be a threat or not, I'm not sure, but with the graffiti, it sent a rather subtle and chilling message to us. Since this incident, we've received comments from Jewish citizens in the community thanking us for standing with them during these hard times. We've also received notes from various church leaders throughout Longmont expressing their disappointment with this sort of behavior in our city. As a church, we fully intend to exercise our constitutional rights to free speech and worship, and we will continue to stand with Israel and the Jewish people of Longmont, for we remember the horrible lessons of the pre-World War II anti-Semitic behavior in Europe and the subsequent Holocaust that followed it. I urge the council to pass a proclamation denouncing all such anti-Semitic behavior in general and here in Longmont specifically. The citizens of our beloved city deserve better than having our reputations assaulted and sullied with such extremism and hatred. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council.
Thank you. Terry Moore?
I don't know what that is.
know why it's doing.
I don't deserve it, but
It's a new timer that we're trying out tonight.
is it going to give me an hour?
Whoa.
It gave him an hour.
Okay, yeah. 3 lines, okay.
I am Terry Moore. I live at 3 Birdsell Place. Last week I talked about home and money and strings. And Councilman Yarborough, I know it upset you. I apologize for that. My apologies. I meant that I wouldn't want to live there, not because it has any negative connotation, but because I don't like the government subsidizing my rent. Meant nothing against like it was taken by you, and I understand your position. So my apologies. Sustainability, Regional Council of Governments, Agenda 23, Agenda 2030, all money with strings. I talked about strings last time I was here. Don't take the money, don't take the strings. When we're talking about DOGE today, we were talking not about the coverage of information, that's what you guys were talking about, but my understanding is DOGE is about corruption in government where people have been taking money. For instance, just last week they looked at USAID, they stopped the money flowing to USAID, and all of a sudden, what was the fallout? Politico folded, they couldn't make payroll. Now, why is money going to USAID and then funding a journalist type of thing that is against many of the things I believe? It's sinister encroachment. Money is no problem at first. The strings are very tenuous and not really there. Then slowly over time, more and more strings appear. Then even more slowly until they finally will ask you for something that might possibly go against my Constitution and your Constitution. And I don't want you to be put in that situation. Don't do it. And I want to say that I appreciate all the work you put in, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I don't understand why you're asking about protection. Do we not have protection for our personal data already? If we don't, there's a serious problem. I think we already do. I don't think they're going for personal information. What they're trying to do is find people who are using money the wrong way, and it's been covered up by people. And I don't like that either. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Lance Whitaker. It's a bit loud. We went from no noise to
extreme.
yeah.
Okay. That's right.
All right, here we go. My name is Lance Whitaker, 1750 Collier Street, Longmont, Colorado. Everybody remembers 1750 Collier Street because next week is my birthday, so you can send all your gifts to 1750 Collier Street. February 17th, by the way. Today is National Guitar Day. Don't own ones, but love to hear if anybody plays. Today is also Safer Internet Day. Good luck with that. That's just a moving target. Every day into the future is a new day and trying to make yourself safer there. Today is also National Inventors Day. And maybe they'll invent something other than the internet. Today is National Peppermint Patty Day, National Visit a Shut-In Visitation Day. So if you got anybody elderly or maybe isolated, you might want to go in and check on them, make sure they're all right, and have a good time with them, play some checkers or whatever. Today is National White T-Shirt Day. Don't own a white shirt, found out that today. Today is also National Spilt Milk Day. Longmont Dairy would like to remind you, while you don't cry over spilt milk, save those bottle caps because they're good for cash in schools. Today is also Make a Friend Day, so if you see someone who's a little on the downside, maybe step up and become a new friend to someone today. We all could use new friends. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and have a great day and stay warm.
Thank you, Lance.
You have a good day.
Scott Stewart.
Mayor Peck, members of council, Scott Stewart, 229 Grant Street. Love hearing the updates, Lance. Yeah.
Sorry. Now you're going to be.
Welcome aboard. I've spoke about in the past as far as my concerns about the airport and its financial obligations and it not meeting those obligations. The airport doesn't currently bring in enough revenue to pay for its basic operations and maintenance. This is kind of why I've asked for a, weight-based landing fee. It relies heavily on lease income. Everything else is pretty insignificant in the overall budget, other than that cell tower, which isn't aeronautical, but it brings in more money than everything else. My question, why is Hangar 39, which is one that we just had a little bit kerfuffle about, being the land lease is at 0.3758, and the new one that you're looking at tonight, which is H46, at 0.3576. Two different rates, two new leases on existing hangars. I would imagine they're supposed to be the same. So, I'm saying this because I think details matter, especially in aviation. I understand that I'm talking about 2 cents, big deal. 2 cents per square foot is what it is. Who's running the show? What's going on? This is a detail that should be simple and easy. This is not much different than running an HOA. And honestly, if you were running an HOA, you get fired for this. Since the activities at the airport have a really big impact on the quality of life for those of us on the ground, and we're finding out that it actually has a pretty big effect on limiting growth within the city, it would seem logical to have a little bit more detail on the oversight. When's the last time the city did an audit of the airport? An overall thing. I'm not talking about something that the FAA does or aviation people do, but when's the last time the city actually dove deep? I think if you go back through the history of the airport, you're going to find out that we used to do trades for land lease stuff and what have you with, you mow the grass and you don't have to pay for the jump zone or the drop zone or what have you. Time for an audit of the airport, and details matter. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Gary Hodges.
Hey, Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. So this is, for all those in the gallery behind me and anybody playing along at home, this is a plot of the council packet sizes over the past 13 months. And to be clear, we're talking about pages, not words. So just want to give everybody that comes to these council meetings an idea about what our council members are having to review in order to prepare for these meetings. And some weeks it's a lot more than others, but most of the time it's still a pretty good amount. I would say, I don't know, I didn't do the maybe 200 or something. Oh, I guess we know the median value, 328 right there. So the average 426, median 328, and max 1479, and there was a few days off with the smallest one being 11. So I'll keep that up, and you guys can all kind of consider that as I make these remarks. Again, most of these are directed to the people behind me. So the takeaway is that it's unlikely any one person who speaks at council meetings will be as broadly informed as our council members are. And this doesn't mean that from time to time a member of the public won't be as informed or even vastly more informed on a particular topic. And I'm thinking in particular about the CU economics PhD candidate who spoke in strong opposition to the minimum wage a few months ago, and the utter dismantling of the hired consultant in a mere 3 minutes. That was rather impressive. But that aside, in general, when we stand at this podium, we should keep in mind that council will generally have a more complete, let's say, knowledge of the issues and how they fit into the overall vision for our city. But it is also our speaking and opinions that contribute to the broader understanding. It does help shape policy. So for our council members, it is the nature of 3-minute presentations that speakers must narrowly define and articulate and articulately present to have any chance of breaking through. And the arguments must be quickly and efficiently arrived at if there's any hope of having influence. And while I acknowledge that 3-minute shorts can suggest a hint of animosity rather than merely a difference in policy, this is largely a function of the format. So reality dictates we limit ourselves to the most important points. There just isn't time to spend precious seconds on words that do not advance the message. And for me personally, I'd like to be clear that I hold no animus toward any individual on council. In fact, I have cordial relationships with those that know me away from these meetings, and I'm sure that would be the case for those of you who don't. This is only about opinion and policy differences on pathways that best advance and elevate Longmont, and by extension will improve the lives of the largest number of residents possible. So I'd like to end with the fantastic job the city does every year with the Christmas lights. And like many others, I'm sure, it's a tradition in our family to drive around and enjoy all the displays. We generally start over, I think, off Lincoln and such and drive around, and Roosevelt Park is always fantastic to drive around. So I appreciate that the city celebrates, and my family does as well. So thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Gary. Steve Altshuler.
It's a very nice and
It's like something's going to appear.
Get off the stage, get the hook.
Very positive.
Very calming.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Steve Altshuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. First of all, I'm glad you're all sitting down, because I'd like to thank the entire council for doing such a great job of listening to the citizens of Longmont in regard to the annexation of Clover Basin last week. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but there's lots of people that feel that they were really heard and listened to, and that their feelings and opinions were taken into account. Second, this goes back a little bit, but I'd like to request that the council make a proclamation declaring that Longmont is not a sanctuary city. I understand that as a home rule city, the council feels that this is not necessary. However, my point is that illegals all across the nation will not know the distinction, and many may come here since Governor Polis made Colorado a sanctuary state. So even though we know it's a home rule city, it might be nice to proclaim that we will not be protecting illegals that may come here from all across the country. And finally, I'm curious what President Trump's executive order canceling the ban on gas appliances does to alter the city's plan to restrict natural gas. And then I'll have one more finally. I would like to second Pastor Mark's proclamation that we condemn anti-Semitic actions in Longmont. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Seeing no one else on the list, we'll close first call public invited to be heard. We are now at the consent agenda. Dawn, would you mind reading the consent agenda by title of the first reading ordinances?
Absolutely, Mayor. The second reading and public hearing for all ordinances introduced on this agenda will be held on February 25th, 2025. Item 9A is ordinance 2025-18, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2025. 9B is ordinance 2025-19, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the river annexation number 3, generally located at 26 South Sunset Street, and zoning the property N-PF public. 9C is ordinance 2025-20, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the city of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel H46 to Keystone Aerial Surveys, Inc. 9D is resolution 2025-09, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the First Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Longmont Housing Authority to provide funding for the Longmont Housing Authority Security Cameras project. 9E is Resolution 2025-10, a resolution of the Longmont City Council adopting a revised fee schedule for marijuana hospitality establishments. 9F is accept 2024 to 2028 capital improvement program amendments approved by the city manager.
Thank you. Don, are there any counselors that want to pull items from the consent agenda? Counselor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I have a point of parliamentary procedure first. For the capital improvement program amendments, do those get to, like, I understand that ordinances go to second reading next time. Resolutions would be approved in just the consent at this point. Is that the same way, is the capital improvement program amendments treated the same way as a resolution or an ordinance?
As a resolution, Councilmember Popkin, it's, if approved, that would be it.
Great, thank you. Then I would like to pull both 9E and 9F from the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to make a motion then to move the consent agenda minus 9E and 9F?
Sure. I'd like to motion to approve the consent agenda minus 9E and 9F.
Right, it's been moved by Councilor Popkin to approve the consent agenda minus 9E and 9F, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, let's vote.
Thank you, sir.
And that carries unanimously. We're now at ordinances on second reading and public hearing items on any matter. The first one is 2025-07. This is a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of an access easement generally located within Hall Ranch open space along Antelope Road. This is a continued public hearing item from the January 28th, 2025 meeting. We do not have a presentation on this, but if there are any questions from council, Nathan Jones is available. Would anyone care to? No, seeing none, I'm going to open up did we have the public hearing item on this last time? I don't think we did.
We did. We opened it and continued the public hearing, so you would be continuing if anybody would like to speak and then closing.
Okay. So now I'm going to open up the public hearing on item 2025-07. Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to address this? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing on 2025-07 and ask for a motion.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. The next one, that carries unanimously. The next item on this agenda is 2025-11. It's a bill for an ordinance amending Section 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting amendments to the City of Longmont General Employees Retirement Plan. Are there any questions from council on this? Councilor Popkin.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Peck. I had a question on all four of the subparts of this for the city attorney, as I flagged for you in advance. I think on each of these there's a reference, but I'll reference, let's see, on item 2 it's page 8, on item 4 it's page 11, but there's a statement that says, as amended effective of January 1st, 2024 and January 1st, 2025 by this ordinance, and I was curious if you were able to look into that legal question as to why January 1, 2024 is referenced in multiple ways.
Thank you, Councilmember Popkin, Eugene May, City Attorney. I was able to look into it, but I don't have a very good answer. So I have a proposal. You are correct. It does reference January 1st, 2024. We do hire a special counsel to help us with these retirement ordinances, which are mostly in reaction to federal law. My suggestion would be to continue these 4 ordinances. We'll consult with our special counsel in the interim and have an answer for you next time.
Thank you. And so by continue, you mean like hold off on approving these right now, or
To
just
make a
approve,
motion to continue these items to the next regular
just to
session.
confirm and make sure that that's not running afoul of anything?
Correct.
Thank you. I will reserve for Councilmember Christ.
Thank you. Counselor Christ?
Okay, my issue is with number 1, B1. And actually has to do with section 6, the spousal consent for retirement benefit. I would prefer that we require spousal consent if anything less than 100% beneficiary is, survivor benefit is chosen. So I would like to also continue this so we can have more discussions. I've been emailing Teresa Malloy back and forth today about this topic. Yeah.
And what was your recommendation, Teresa?
It was more, she just answered my questions as to what it would mean.
Okay.
What it, my concern is that women tend to, on average, live 14 years longer than their spouses. That's just an average. And so I think this, if they are 50% or less, they are more greatly affected than say, men tend to be. And so Teresa provided me with a nice little chart about what you will receive if each is chosen.
And I'm going to invite Teresa Malloy, I see her coming down to address this.
Mayor and Council, Teresa Malloy, Chief Financial Officer. So if we do continue these, Councilmember Christ, I think that we can clarify your issue with our special counsel and see what she thinks our options are for making that a little bit clearer for you.
Yeah, so continuation is a good option.
I would say yes.
Okay. Well, then I move that we take 10B, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and continue it to the next available space in the in the schedule. I'm looking at.
Pardon me?
Be a point of order.
Oh.
We don't have to hold public hearing to continue.
I don't think we do. There's no point in holding a public hearing if this is not going to be voted on tonight. Is that correct, or am I assuming that?
Mayor and Council, Eugene May, I had not considered that. If it was a notice public hearing, I think maybe you open the public hearing and then continue the whole thing to the next regular session.
Okay, so if you can hold off on your motion, let's open the public hearing and then we'll make the motion.
Okay, let's put the motion on hold until the public hearing is complete.
Okay, thank you. By the way, good catches on that. So now I'm going to open up the public hearing on 2025-11. Is there anybody in the chamber that would like to address this? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for a motion from Councilor Christ, who put a motion on hold. Can you reiterate what it is you asked for?
Mayor, if I might interject?
Yes.
City Attorney May, is it sufficient to open one public hearing for all 4 items and do one motion for all 4, or would you like that individually?
I think in the past we've done all 4, but I don't know if that
I don't
was
believe anybody's
consent agenda.
signed up for any of the 4.
Yeah.
Sorry about the Nexus.
No. So this is a new wrinkle, ladies and gentlemen.
New wrinkle.
That we have
the
not.
attorney brain's thinking. Mayor, the conservative approach would be to take them separately, open the public hearing, and continue each one separately to the same date.
Okay. All right, let's go with, let me pull them back up on my screen so I can do it correctly. 2025-11, let's hold the public hearing for 2025-11, which is the one that the two counselors were mentioning, one of the ones. Seeing no one in the public that would like to address 2025-11, I will close the public hearing and I need a motion for this one.
Sorry, if I may interject, are we continuing to March 4th? That's the next regular session? Is that too quickly for special counsel?
Okay. So we're going to have 4 separate motions here. Counselor Christ.
So I move we continue ordinance 2025-11 to March 4th.
Second.
All right, it's been moved. 2025-11 has been moved. The motion is to move it to March 4th. Let's vote. It's been moved by Counselor Chris, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring. And that carries unanimously. The second one is 2025-12, which is a bill for an ordinance amending Section 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting amendments to the money accumulation pension plan for employees of the city of Longmont. Are there any questions from council that need to be carried over? Councilor Chris, is your light still on, or is that from previous?
From previous, I was just gonna make
Okay.
the motion again.
Go ahead, Councilor Christ.
I move ordinance 2025-12.
We need to have the.
Point of order, we need to still do a public.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seeing no one on council that wants to discuss this bill, I'm going to open up the public hearing on 2025-12. Is there anybody in the chamber that would like to address this bill? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing on 2025 and turn it over to Councilor Chris for a motion.
I move ordinance 2025-12 be continued to March 4th.
It's been moved by Councilor Chris to continue 2025-12 to a March 4th meeting, seconded by Councilor Popkin. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. The next one is 2025-13, a bill for an ordinance amending Section 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting the amendment to the City of Longmont Police Pension Plan and Trust Agreement. Are there any questions or discussion from councilors on this bill? Seeing none, I will open up the public hearing on 2025-13. Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to address council on this bill? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion. Councilor Christ.
I move ordinance 2025-13 be continued to March 4th.
It's been moved by Councilor Christ to continue this bill as well to March 4th, seconded by Councilor Popkin. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. So the last one under 10B is 2025-14, a bill for an ordinance amending Section 3.04.885 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adopting amendments to the City of Longmont Fire Employees Pension Plan and Trust Agreement. Is there any discussion or questions from councilors? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing on 2025-14. Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to address this bill? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing on 2025-14 and ask for a motion. Councilor Christ.
I move ordinance 2025-14 be continued to March 4th.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor Christ to put 2025-14 on the March 4th agenda and seconded by Councilor Popkin. All those in favor, let's vote. All those opposed, don't vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Those are really good calls that you made. What's our next one here? The next one is 2025-15. This is 10C. It is a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 6.40 of the Longmont Municipal Code, adding Section 6.40.40 concerning hotel licenses. Are there any questions from the council or discussion? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing on 2025-15. Is there anyone in the public that would like to discuss the hotel license amendment? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion. Councilor Popkin?
Oh, well, actually, I had a question.
Okay.
On this. Can I jump in here?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Jump in.
Thank you. Overall, I understand the intention of this, and I just had a clarifying question, or maybe more than just a clarifying question for the city manager on this. One of the things, we have a couple different license items on the agenda today. Specifically, we have the marijuana hospitality licenses and fees there, and then we have these hotel licenses. And I don't see any fees attached to the hotel license schedule. So I just wanted to understand kind of more about the mechanism here of adding a license without any kind of fee assessment here. If you could clarify more what's behind that.
Yeah, so we, and council, I think, had the luxury of hearing this explanation before you were on the council. So
I'm very sorry.
It's good. Well, that's fine. It's good to ask this
it's
question.
fine.
I think when we started approaching this situation, one of the things that we were looking at, and as we talk about this is really designed to encourage people to work with us.
Sorry, people meaning?
Hotel owners.
Thank you.
To work with us in resolving issues that we were seeing in some of the establishments in our community. And when we evaluated this and we looked at the number of hotels, there wasn't necessarily the administrative component that we're seeing in some of these other items that are before you today. And we wanted to start the process really creating a mechanism that if we absolutely had to, we could utilize to resolve issues within our community, but really do something more in partnership with the owners versus coming at it from a standpoint of, oh, we need to do this for these issues and we're going to charge you a fee to do that. Obviously, this is something that we'll look at in the future to determine how it's working, but that was really our mindset.
Got it. So if I'm understanding correctly, this is a stick-based mechanism, if you will, but it's not, there's no punitive financial element of it. It's more about creating a process where the city can enforce certain certain violations more effectively.
Correct. Efficiently and effectively, when you look at the time that it would take us to deal with these issues.
Thanks. And you don't think that there's, it's enough of an effort administratively to merit any kind of fee to just recoup those costs there? That's not.
Not with this.
Cool. Thank you. No further questions.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor. I move ordinance 2025-15.
Second.
The bill 2025-15 has been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferry. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. 10D is 2025-16. It's a bill for an ordinance authorizing a lease agreement between the City of Longmont as lessee and the Archdiocese of Denver as lessor for use of the St. John the Baptist Church parking lot for Longmont City employee parking. Are there any questions or discussion from councilors? Seeing none, I will open up the public hearing on 2025-16. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this bill? Seeing no one, can I have a motion?
I move ordinance 2025-16.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, 2025-16, and seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. 10E is 2025-17. This is a bill for an ordinance authorizing the city of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport Hangar Parcel H23, the premises, to Ellen Green, tenant. Is there any discussion? Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. One of the Ward 2 residents who spoke earlier, Scott Stewart, had raised a question about a difference in or in how different lease prices were set here. I don't have the Mile High lease right up in front of me here, but I just wanted to understand how the lease prices are determined and if that is a difference that is based on size of square foot or if that is a rate difference, just how that's treated.
So invite the airport manager, Levi Brown, to answer that.
Good
Thank
evening. Rates and charges are applied standardly via our rate and charge sheet. And again, I was actually trying to pull that up here just last second, but unfortunately I couldn't get it to come up on my phone. But the current one, H23, is 4696 or 0.4696 per square foot. That's because in their previous lease, that's what it was. And via our rates and charges sheet, it says we either charge the new standard rate, which is what Mile High would have been charged, or if it's higher, the higher rate. So that's why it was applied that way.
Got it. So there are two different ways that is assessed.
There's a caveat, if you will, to it. But there's a standard rates and charge sheet that we apply leases to. But if the rate is already higher than that via CPI increases from previous years, then it is created at that rate for the new lease.
Got it. So there was no leasee here is being treated differently under airport policy.
Nope.
I just want to make sure that Scott's comment is pressure tested here.
Yep.
Yeah, no, generally, so when they reevaluate the lease rates, the leases are different times. And so what happened in this case is the CPI index took this lease up. And so when they evaluated the lease rates, it was here. And so instead of bringing them from 37 down, they hold at that current rate based on the CPI increase.
Noted. Okay.
So-
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Would you like to move this bill then? Which one is it? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for the question. And I will now open the public hearing on 2025-17. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address this bill? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing on 2025-17 and now ask for a motion.
I'll move ordinance 2025-17. Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor Christ. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. That is the last item on the ordinances on second reading. We are now at the items removed from the consent agenda, and that was 9E and F. Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. 9F, we'll do them in order, but 9F was just a comment I wanted to make on that. So that's not going to be anything serious here for folks. For 9E, I wanted to ask a couple questions of staff on the fee structure here. And, I think I'd raised this when we voted on the ordinance last time. But just to what extent do we know of any public safety implications and costs related to or fiscal impact of public safety enforcement action or monitoring or response that would come up with that? I don't see that in the fee schedule here. I don't know if that's standard or not. To my knowledge, this is a fairly new type of license. So generally curious how staff approached this, whether that was factored in, and any more context you'd like to share on that.
Mayor and council, that'd be me, I guess. No Tim Hole tonight. Don Quintana, City Clerk. When we considered setting the fees for hospitality establishments, this is another one where lots happened before you were appointed. So the approach taken was to mimic or to follow the lead of City and County of Denver's fees that they had set. And so we basically set our fees based off of their fees. and went from there. Again, as I mentioned in previous, when we reached out to public safety, we didn't receive a lot of concern in that regard, though I know that they probably have some. In terms of their time investment on the front end in the licensing side, we do go out annually to all of our retail marijuana stores and would also do that to the hospitality establishment to do an on-site inspection. And that takes 3 or 4 hours of staff time with the 4 that we've had. So depending on how many establishments actually open, that would be increased. Other than that, the enforcement side, we haven't tried to predict.
Thank you, Don. And just so I appreciate the context.
Sorry.
Looking across, looking across to City and County of Denver here, are these rates proportional to, identical to, following some lead? What was borrowed from?
I'm just speaking about the marijuana hospitality
Correct.
application and license fees. The others were existing. So we didn't make amendments to any of the other fees there. Those have been in code. So on the
Correct. I'm just speaking about the hospitality businesses here. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm sorry, repeat your question?
Yeah, just when you said you looked to the City, County, and Denver in terms of setting the fee schedule or learning from that, was that a direct borrow from? Was it proportional in some way to, based on population? Was it per capita prorated?
Direct borrow.
Direct borrow at the same level.
Same rate, yes.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Popkin, do you want to address 9F? Or
We
did
need
you
a-
already?
We need this one.
I'm sorry, what?
We need a vote on this one.
Oh, first, okay. Would you like to make a motion then on 9E? You don't want to? Okay. I move Counselor Rodriguez.
I move approval of Resolution 2025-10.
It's been moved by Counselor Rodriguez, seconded by Counselor Yarbrough to move 2025-10 from the consent agenda. Let's vote. There we go.
I think you refreshed the right.
No, it's, oh, here we go, now. Got the spinning wheel of death.
And that passes 5-2 with Councilors Popkin and Christ in opposing. Thank you. Counselor Popkin.
Yes, thank you. So the CIP amendment process was fairly new to me. Staff clarified this before the meeting, which was helpful. And I just wanted to make a comment. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Harold, is that for the electric substation upgrades here, the funding, the $300,000 that's going to support that is actually coming from operational savings elsewhere.
Within the electric fund.
Within the electric fund. So it's just a question of more efficient use of dollars spent in one place and retaining those savings and repurposing that.
Correct.
So just wanted to acknowledge that I think, that those kinds of funding shifts make a ton of sense here. And I just wanted the public to be aware of that's how some of these investments do get made, is when we capture savings in other places. So thank you. Do I have to make a motion to approve this since it was pulled?
Mm-hmm. Or someone else can.
Great. Well, I can make a motion on this one. Motion to approve, hold on,
I think it's actually accept.
Motion to accept 2024 to 2028 capital improvement program amendments approved by the city manager.
Okay, it's been moved by Counselor Popkin and seconded by Counselor McCoy to accept 23 capital improvement program amendments. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously.
And Mayor, this may be a good opportunity for me to quickly kind of touch on why this is before you all.
Okay.
So, years ago, when I first got here, we were running capital improvement amendments in front of council, and we found that there was an operational challenge with this. And so, the charter has a provision in it that triggers this, But what the council decided is that as long as we were keeping the funds within their fund structure, the council gave me the authority to make those capital improvement amendments. We just had to bring it back to you all for you to see it. So I just wanted to give some context because that was a good question earlier, and I'm not sure that we've explained it to the full body before.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. Okay, we are now at general business. Does anybody, all right, let's.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Teresa Malloy, Chief Financial Officer. One additional clarification. It also cannot be a change in scope to the project.
Oh,
If there's a
okay.
change in scope, that comes back to you all.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Do we need a bio break up here? Staff? All right, let's take a 5-minute break.
Good, how are you?
I'm hoping the roads are good tonight.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been out.
We are back in session. We are now at general business, and the first thing on this agenda is update on building and electrification code adoption. So we do have a staff presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Blas Hernandez, Chief Building Official for the City of Longmont. Tonight, I'm going to speak a little bit about what's going on with the building codes. This has been a very unusual year for us, for any city, really. The energy code has become a very hot topic, and a lot of cities are challenged with the adoption process. And the reason for that is the state of Colorado is now involved in developing amendments that will go into a bill that cities will have to adopt. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about what the landscape looks like and what we are challenged with when we talk about the code adoption this year. So first off, the International Code Council had they published the code late, so we were not able to look at it until sometime in August or September. And so the reason for that is, and I'll go into that a little later on. And then we have the state, which is working as we speak on the state low energy and carbon code. That's another reason that we are having some issues with the adoption. And then there's also a group that the city is collaborating with. It's the Northwest Metropolitan Regional Energy Code Cohort. I'll just call it the Code Cohort. They are also creating amendments for the code. And then we also retained a engineering group, Group 14, to do some modeling and cost studies of the new energy codes. So that was kind of put on hold because we're still waiting to see what direction we're going. And then at the end of this presentation, I will present some options that you guys can, the council can take, and any other possible options that you would like to see. So the code amendments that I'm speaking about are still in progress. The state, the code cohort are working on these, so we're watching this with great interest. The first draft of the code, of the state code, is now been finalized, and they are already getting a lot of pushback from public comments, which is normal. They're going to go through 3 drafts, and the third draft will be the final draft. The Northwest, or the code cohort, is also working on code amendments that will go above and beyond what the normal building code calls for, and they want to be in alignment with the state low energy and carbon code. They have to include those in their amendments, as well as other codes that go above and beyond the code. The state code has a mandate when it is finally published, and any city that plans to adopt city codes after July 1st, 2026 has to adopt this code. They can wait for a later date, but if you do adopt the code after this date, they do have to comply with the state energy code. And as I said earlier, Group 14 will be doing some modeling on greenhouse gases and the amendments to the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code. That includes both the state energy code and the proposed amendments for the code cohort. Part of the reason that the ICC took a while to publish the code is that there was disagreement at the national level. Some of the code provisions that dealt with carbon gas emissions and climate action, the Energy Board felt that that was not appropriate to keep those in the body of the code. So those portions of the code were moved into the appendices. The appendix is in the back of the code book, and they can be adopted if the city wants to. They tend to be more stringent and maybe a little more controversial for this year. The State Energy Board is reviewing the appendices also, so they will probably try to adopt some of those. And the final version for the state energy code will be in May of this year. The code cohort is preparing also amendments, as I said earlier, that are above and beyond what the regular code requires. And so they do want to advance climate goals while creating a regional consistency for developers and contractors. A little bit about the code cohort. They started back in 21, and the reason for that is they wanted to promote regionally consistent energy codes for both commercial and residential properties, and support ambitious climate goals. They do want to be as ambitious as possible. The members, we are one of the members, and we have a few communities that are involved with this, including Boulder County, Boulder, Westminster, and Berthoud. They have 3 phases. The first one was EV and solar ready. We have already adopted those. Those were the first provisions that the state required. The second phase included a roadmap to achieve net zero. And net zero basically means you're consuming energy. The energy you consume is also being renewed by renewable sources. And then phase 3 is the one they're working on now. That's called the Low Energy and Carbon Code. So these are aligned with changing technologies, legal considerations, and potential pathways to zero emission buildings. Some key points about the code cohort. As I mentioned earlier, they do want to develop some stringent energy efficiencies based on the 24 IECC. The code cohort wants to continue developing these until 2030. That's their goal. And increasing energy efficiency packages that go beyond the standard code requirements. Their goals are to promote unified energy code and simplifying compliance for builders and increase code understanding. Part of the requirements is not just to develop the code amendments, but to create outreach to train builders, engineers, contractors, and building officials. This is a very complex code, and as building officials, we find it challenging, and I can only imagine what the builders are going through also. Stronger impact and potentially achieve greater energy savings, carbon reduction compared to individual cities acting alone. So this is a joint venture to try to be as uniform as possible. Here's a simple roadmap the code cohort has developed. And as you can see, we're kind of waiting for guidance, and that's what we'll be asking for tonight. Some cities tend to be a little more aggressive than others. One thing to keep in mind is that the code cohort is not a mandatory thing. It is provided for guidance for cities who plan to adopt the new energy codes. So some of the key points for the state code is they want to complete this, as I may have mentioned, May 2025. There is public comments after each draft. Right now, they are completing the public comments for the first draft, and then the next draft will start. And they will ask for public comments for that, and then complete the third draft that will hopefully become the approved bill.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yes.
Before I forget, where can the public go to comment on these? Is it a website?
Yes, if you Google State Energy Code, you will find information as to the process and public comments. Anyone is invited to participate for the public comments. It's open to everyone, but you will find that if you go online. Just look for State Energy Code. And there's a lot of information on there right now, including the process for public comment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So the goal is to minimize CO2 emissions associated with renovated homes and commercial buildings, new and renovated homes. There's also an aspect to maintain housing affordability. That's going to be a tough one because when you talk about making the energy code more stringent, that almost translates to more money, but that's initial cost. Later on, as the home or business will probably have better energy efficiency, and so the payoff is in the long run. If you're just looking at initial cost, that could seem like a deterrent to adopt some of these, but the whole idea is to make the energy more efficient. So that's one of the things that they're going to try to stress. Provide pathways for both all electric and mixed fuel. And I want to emphasize that when we're talking about all electric, we're talking about a preference for all electric. Right now, we're not proceeding with an all electric option for reasons that I think you were informed upon. So we're trying to make it so that they can use electricity if they want to, and we want to give them incentives to do that. So the amendments are created in a way that it's harder to use mixed fuel, gas, energy, and it's easier to pass with an electric preferred code. So as I mentioned earlier, this becomes a requirement after July 1st of next year. Here's a brief roadmap showing the State Energy Code roadmap. And as you might see, the final draft is going to be ready in April, and hopefully we'll have this ready by May. Or we won't, the State Energy Board. And so everybody's waiting with anticipation to see what is included in this. As I said already, the first draft is receiving a lot of pushback from comments and even the building officials. They disagree with some of the requirements in the code that they're developing. The modeling for the codes it will be based on certain scenarios. They'll take a look at the current Longmont Energy Code, how that works, and then compare it to the new 2024 IECC unamended. We are currently on the 2021 Energy Code. A third scenario will be the amendments from the state low carbon and energy code. They will look at those and see how those work in a model and cost studies. And then scenario 4 would be the recommended amendments that the code cohort is proposing. And then potential for additional amendments as directed. The expected results from the modeling will include the comparison among scenarios so that we can make informed decisions. It will look at the energy use, the greenhouse gas emissions, predicted first and annual energy cost, as well as data that we will use to present to the stakeholders. We do have to present this information and all amendments to the stakeholders. That's part of our adoption process. This will include all types of buildings here in Longmont, as well as for the local and regional developers and builders. The whole idea is to try to get uniform amendments across the board so that a developer or a builder in Boulder or other cities will also expect the same codes here in Longmont. Uniformity helps us with enforcement. So now we get to the options that I would like to ask for. And the first option, which is our preferred option, would be to delay the adoption process so that we have time to review and analyze the state code requirements and amendments that they're working on right now, as well as the code cohort requirements. And then the cost modeling that I discussed to determine the costs so that we can better communicate that to the stakeholders when we meet in our code adoption meetings. There is another option. We can not do this, and if you direct us to just go forward, just adopt what you can, we can do that also. The thing that I think about is that the other cities are going to wait for the state and the code cohort to come up with their amendments, and they will adopt them this year or for certain by January 1st. We will in some way be behind the schedule because we won't have the benefit of seeing those finalized amendments. So what we would like to do is wait for those amendments to come out, incorporate them in one all-inclusive code adoption so that we will be on par with the rest of the communities and move on. I mean, that to me would be the best case scenario. But of course, you have the option of requesting more or other options if you choose. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. We just would like to get your opinion and how you would like us to proceed.
So I do have a question because it was my motion to have all new residential, not old homes that have already developed in our city, but the new residential developers be all electric. Your presentation for me, and it's a lot, was only about commercial, not necessarily about residential. And can we adopt under the 2021 codes already, since the 2024 codes have not been adopted? And to your point about it would be expensive, there is an argument, I guess, to be made that the development of residential developments, not necessarily rebuilds or renewal, I'm sorry, I got the word wrong, because of the size of the street, in order to put a gas line down, it would be less expensive for the developer not to put that gas line in and have more of a building area that they could use for building if it was, am I saying that correctly? So I got a little confused when you said it would be more expensive up front. I don't know what we're talking about.
Right. There are two different issues. You mentioned the lot size and the gas infrastructure.
Yes.
That requirement is in a public works standard, okay? I'm talking about the actual building code. So the public works standard allows developers to say, hey, I'm not going to use gas. I'm going to try to save money. That's done up front. That's done in the planning phase, the development phase. Once the lots are ready, they apply for the permits. So in that case, if they did not account for gas, then the buildings that we would review would be for all electric buildings. And just to clarify the first comment you made, these codes apply to both residential as well as commercial buildings, okay? This is not ready yet for existing buildings or retrograde codes.
That's what I
Codes
was looking for.
traditionally have not done that, but that would be a logical step in the future to require existing buildings to meet more stringent code requirements. But we're not there yet.
We're not there yet,
We're
and
not there
that
yet.
really wasn't the motion to begin
Yeah.
with.
So did I clarify your question regarding the lot developments versus the building codes?
You did.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Blas, thank you very much. So what's on the council comm here, the council options 1 or 2 is what you're trying to get some direction on tonight. And I think we want to make sure that we include all the stakeholders and anybody that might have some thoughts on this, people that are working on this from other communities. I think that's critical. And so, I would move that we choose option 1, which is delay adoption of the 2024 building codes until that information is solidified. And
I agree. Second. No, you're fine. I wasn't in sync with you this time.
Councillor McCoy made the motion to to wait to adopt the 2024 building codes, IECC codes. And that was seconded by Councillor Chris. So we have discussion. Councillor Popkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Peck. And thank you, Blas and Susan and Lisa and all the other staff who've been involved with this for multiple years in the region. How do I get rid of this? So first of all, I just want to commend, I know it's extra time to work as a region, whether it's in a county of a group of municipalities at the county level, whether it's across the Denver metro area and beyond. I just think that regional approach makes a lot of sense in this case and is really encouraging. So thank you for that effort. And just for the community's awareness, this kind of an update in the whole building process and code process does depend on having an available workforce and contractors and industry and supply chain, frankly, that can kind of meet these needs. And so I think it's helpful in clarifying that this is being handled at a regional level from both a local economic development standpoint as well as just being able to actually achieve what the goals of the code are. So just wanted to thank you all on that. The opportunity here is also that, this is, as a region, can support new emerging industries and technologies being developed, installed, people trained in our region. So that's really helpful on high efficiency appliances and electric appliances too. The value of the code here, it's just a comment, I think some people very much know this, but the value of these code updates and the direction that this is headed is that it makes it easier to build sustainably and efficiently now than it is to have to course correct later, right? It's just more fiscally sound to build right and build sustainably from the start. And that course correction could be from technological updates to improve technologies, health impacts down the road, policy changes down the road that require that. If we aren't prepared or already moving on that, there can be consequences as well as kind of being a laggard and having to catch up. I don't think that directly speaks to the motion. I support kind of delaying to implement this in an appropriate way. But, we want to be intentional about this, and clearly staff has been, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to share for the public's awareness, something that I've been paying attention to before I was on city council, but while I was on the planning commission, was kind of what the market was trying to do on the residential sector for electrification before any code requirements were in place. And just from the examples over the last 2 years of my time on the planning commission, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 different developments that were proposed, some with the affordable housing component already in them, that were not mixed fuel, that were proposed as all electric residential construction. That included Modern West 1 and 2, regardless of their status now, that's what they were proposed as. The expansion of Prospect Newtown into the 5th filing, the Habitat for Humanity single-family homes, and the house pad development, which obviously the city knows well. Those all were all electric and were not were ahead of the code here because that's where the market was headed. There were others who have talked about that, but just weren't at that stage in the process. It certainly wasn't uniform and unanimous across the development community there that I saw, but there were far more than I think people would expect who are already designing to that. Partly for the reason that Mayor Peck even mentioned, that there are some additional design flexibility options that come with how you build or when you don't have to build as much of redundant infrastructure in terms of pipes and wires and poles. So that's really encouraging. I had a couple clarifying questions for you, Blas, or maybe for other staff here. You mentioned that Longmont would be behind others based on how we're moving at this point. Can you just clarify what you mean by kind of where we're following, where we're part of the pack?
Sure. Yes, what I meant by that is that we're waiting for these amendments to be finalized, both from the state energy code and the cohort. If we adopt now, we don't really know what those amendments are going to look like. So we will adopt something to our best ability. But later on, when we adopt another code, is more likely when it will happen, is we will have to take those codes that everyone is waiting for and adopt it, but we will be doing it later. So that's what's going to put us behind. I would like to do it now, but if you guys want to go forward, you just say so.
Noted, thank you. On the cohort members sheet in our packet, there was a line at the bottom that says, based on the available information from several organizations with electric preferred code provisions, staff compiled a preliminary comparison of similar code categories across these organizations, blank space. And I was wondering if that was just something that got cut off, if there was another page that didn't get attached, if there aren't any other organizations.
Are you talking about this presentation?
No, I'm talking about what we had in our packet. It was a scanned in document called cohort members.
Okay. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay.
But it's probably a typo of some type.
Fair enough. If you're able to follow up at some point via email, I don't think that's
Okay.
urgent, but would love to know how you guys are comparing across other organizations there.
Okay.
Thank you. And then Blas, from your experience, when we were talking about building codes and the value that they play in our community, how long does the average residential building, let's say non-single family home, typically built, like how long is it built to last?
Well, that's a good question. I would say at least 50 years if you care for the house and maintain it. Things wear out, windows wear out, shingles constantly wear out. Someone who would not maintain the home, the home would not last very long. So it depends on the owners, the ownership.
And then for commercial and industrial properties, are we also talking 50 plus years for a structure?
Correct. And probably more because commercial buildings generally tend to be built with more solid materials such as mortar, brick, metal, those types of materials.
So when we're thinking about the health, the environmental, the frankly economic reasons to have code updates that are updated and modern and meet the needs of the city and the city's goals, I mean, our building stock really matters, right? And what we build now will impact stuff for decades.
That's correct.
Thank you. You mentioned carbon dioxide emissions as kind of one of the primary motives. Are there also methane emissions from gas-based appliances too?
I'm not up to speed on the science, but there's a nitrogen oxide emission. There's possible methane emissions. It just depends on the fuel you're burning. Some gases will produce methane when you burn them. I've heard of that out in the East Coast. There's different heating materials you can use. Here gas is very prevalent. If you go out east, they burn a lot of oil, and oil gives off other types of emissions. But for the most part, they're carbon dioxide emissions that are not good for the environment.
Right. So when right, and you bring up a good point about other types of fuels as well that people burn for heat or for cooking purposes. Certainly carbon dioxide emissions as a major emission as a result of burning anything. Nitrogen oxide And methane, I think, is like when we talk about natural gas, that is methane, right? And so if there are leaks in the pipeline process, if there are leaks in the appliance if you just turn on but don't light your stove, that's methane that is coming out. That's what you're smelling. So we're talking about multiple different types of gases and emissions here.
Correct.
And I want the public to be aware of that. And that leads me to my next comment here, which is, and maybe I don't think anyone here came up with the name Low Energy and Carbon Code, but I don't really know why it's called that. And in the spirit of a public comment that was earlier of like, we need to be accurate about stuff, this is not, I mean, we're talking about energy efficiency, yeah, so we're using less energy when we're using it, but generally more electric appliances are going to result in more energy consumption, electricity consumption overall. And we're not talking about carbon as an element, we're talking about emissions and pollution. So I'm not, this is not hurled at you. I'm just saying if when Longmont chooses to adopt something here, can we make sure that the name is accurate to what we are trying to achieve and is consistent with the science on this?
Yeah, unfortunately, that name was somebody at the state level.
Yeah.
And I agree. I've received many comments saying, what do you mean by that? I know what it means, but other people may not know what that means.
I know what it's trying to convey.
Low
but
carbon signifies low carbon emissions, carbon dioxide emissions. They simplified it for obvious reasons, but that's what they're trying to convey. And then low energy means we're using less energy because we're being more efficient. So how they worded that is not entirely accurate.
No, it's a potpourri of misnomers. And
Yes.
so I would appreciate if as we move forward here, what we adopt
Mhm.
is accurate and consistent with the science here. I'd be happy to workshop different names with you and staff
Sure.
on this so
Absolutely.
that we can make sure that this is
Yeah.
accurately reflecting what the code is actually doing. I would love to partner with you on that before we actually adopt that.
Absolutely.
I could not see myself voting for something that is so inaccurate, even though I support 99% of what this is trying to do.
Absolutely.
The last thing I'll just make as a public comment, if you're watching this and wondering, hey, regardless of code, how can I upgrade the efficiency of my house or my dwelling? Well, do I have the place for you? That would be Efficiency Works, which is something Longmont and PRPA can help fund for the community, including rebates and incentives for higher efficiency appliances, other efficiency solutions, insulation, noted. Yeah, noted. And there are some specific upgrade incentives for existing residents right now, commercial and businesses as well, for different appliance upgrades too. So I hope people will look into that. I know I am.
I agree.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Pack. One thing that has not been mentioned tonight, and I will not take up the full time, is that I'd like to thank our city attorney's office, counsel Jeremy Tyrell. I believe all of city council received an email specific to this topic. While I'm not going to go into it because it is technically confidential, I will say that I really appreciate the email as it concerns monitoring current litigation going on germane to this topic. And I really specifically want to commend Councilor Tyrell for keeping us updated on where all of that stands at this point, because I feel that helps us make a prudent decision when it comes to determining how fast we move forward with the mayor's motion as far as all electrification in new residential development, as well as not trying to be duplicative with code, be it adopting now and then having to re-adopt afterwards once the state board comes out with all of its recommendations or requirements, I would say. So I just wanted to point that out, that the city council also has a role in determining what kind of legal liability we expose ourselves to with our motions, and knowing also somewhat what the current administration's energy policy is. I wouldn't see less opportunities for litigation concerning restrictive options concerning energy use in development. So with that, I think that we're pretty clear that delaying is the most prudent, but be happy to see any counter argument to that.
So as I look, I don't see anyone else in the queue, so as I look at this list of the cohort members and under electric preferred, it looks like 95% of all of the members prefer, or we're the only one that is just reviewing. It looks like everyone else in this list, except for Westminster, Vale, and Longmont, well, there are a couple more little smaller ones, but it looks like the majority have prefer all electric. Where can we see all of those amendments? I'm curious as to what they are saying and the pushback and exactly what they're talking about. Because my hope is that by going all electric, the affordability of the homes will be less. And that is the other part of making Longmont affordable without the city or LHA having to take all of that on themselves, that developers, seeing that they can build less expensive, would be happy to not be able to not have to put in gas in new residential developments. So I'm interested in where we can see those amendments and why the majority of the members are preferring electric over any other type of heating. So where can we see those amendments?
The amendments for the state energy code is available online. And now that the first draft is available, you will be able to see the first draft, all of the 165 pages. It's a very long document, but the reason it's long is because they're showing the code and then they're pointing out the changes in the code. So the changes have been highlighted. Those are available online through the state energy code. And then the amendments for the code cohort, they're still in progress. I have not seen a list of amendments yet. We're talking about, they are discussing the state code. So when the state code amendments have been fairly finalized, and they will take that information and then make their amendments and suggestions also.
And has Longmont made any suggestions on amendments?
We are ready to do that, but because of the climate with the state working on an energy code and the code cohort that we're participating in, we have to wait for that to work its way through. And that's why I'm standing here to ask for time to analyze these codes, and then we will adopt those codes, put them into our code, and you will have an opportunity to see what our amendments look like to ensure that you're satisfied with the progress we're making.
So have any, I'm sorry, I will call on you in a minute. So have any of the other members already made amendments to the code? Any other members of the cohort?
Not that I'm aware of. I speak with one of the board members on the energy board, the state energy board. His name is Tim Pate. He works as the building official in Broomfield, and I've asked him, can you give me an idea what these amendments look like? No, I can't say anything. I have to wait for those amendments to be published.
Okay. Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick clarification, and since Blas was so kind enough to give me a briefing right before this meeting on the code adoption, I think maybe there's a clarification here that can help kind of everyone understand the electric preferred thing. So my understanding of this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Blas, is that the electric preferred is less about like what the goal of the community is here, but more how they're incorporating how they're incorporating this code update into their code. And so is it a preference? Is it a requirement? Is it kind of like, it's kind of like the structure of the mechanism.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes, it's the way of how are we going to enforce these standards. We can't tell you got to go electric, but we can create amendments that will make it easier to pass the energy code review. Every building built in Longmont has to go through a review process, and it's easier to pass with a passing score if you use electric energy. But for those who want to use mixed energy, they have to jump a few more hurdles to get approval.
And to Councilor Popkin, I'm just going to go to Louisville. They already did adopt some all-electric codes with exceptions, and as well as Boulder County did. So to say these are just recommendations, some of them are already in place. And I think that Louisville did it after the Marshall Fire.
Yes, no, sorry. If that was misstated on my end, I apologize. I was not saying whether they had done it or not. I was trying to clarify for everyone's benefit here of the mechanism that's used, whether it's a requirement or whether it's like a preference-based incentive through the code approach. So it's just different approaches of the
Okay.
code strategy. Yeah. No, I appreciate you clarifying that on Louisville and who else
Well,
was it?
Lafayette.
And Boulder.
They already adopted it with exceptions.
Yeah, there are multiple communities across the country that have.
2021.
Correct. There are multiple communities across the country that have adopted electrification requirements in different ways or strategies in different ways. Per Councilmember Rodriguez's comment before, there are also some legal elements to consider that I appreciate staff being conscientious of. So, thank you.
Seeing no one else, and there was a motion that has been made. There's a motion on the table. Let me get back to that. Pull it up. Can you pull that up for me? Is it it? Oh, I'm in the wrong screen, sorry. To delay adoption of building codes. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. I'm the only dissent. So that passes 6-1 because I would like to adopt under the 2021, assuming there would be no amendments that would discourage that all electric in residential new developments. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council.
Thank you. Susan, did you say, you look like you wanted to say something. Come on up to the microphone, please.
My mouth open.
I know, I saw that.
Mayor and council members, I'm Susan Bartlett with Longmont Power and Communications. And I have not been a participant on the code cohort. Blas and Matt and Lisa have all participated. But we did receive kind of a summary of the objectives of the cohort, as well as a summary of the amendments that will likely be part of the cohort recommendations. And I was trying to find a good opportunity to say I could give these to Dawn
Please.
and make sure that all of you receive those. Again, knowing that it's draft. I'm sorry? And only for residential. We'll get the commercial ones in a couple of weeks. So just a little more information for you to have. Hopefully it's not confusing but helpful. And we can certainly share that next version when it's available with you. So
Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to get across. What are they thinking of? What are they talking about? What?
Yeah, and I will just clarify, sorry, Mayor Peck and council members, this is. Sorry, Lisa Knobloch, Sustainability Manager. Mayor Peck and council members, I just want to also clarify, I know this is confusing and there are many different components of this and many more layers, that this is referring to the Northwest Regional Code cohort and not the state's low energy and carbon code, which also has a draft out right now as well.
Okay.
The code cohort is following the low energy and carbon code, and their goal, in addition to the ones that Blas mentioned during his presentation, is to be a pathway for communities that want to go above and beyond what becomes the final version of the state's low energy and carbon code. So it lays out scenarios and pathways for communities that want to push further on things like energy efficiency and building electrification and other components like that. So trying to make that as clear as possible, knowing that there's a lot of different pieces that are in play right now.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Okay, any more discussion on this item? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the other part of our agenda, which is the accessory dwelling units, proposed changes. I would like staff to, there is staff.
Just me.
Just you. It's good enough.
Good evening, Mayor Peck, members of council, Don Burchett, with Planning and Development Services, here tonight to talk to you a little bit about the regulations that were passed by the state of Colorado regarding accessory dwelling units and the requirements that are placed upon us as far as amending our codes to allow for the construction of accessory dwelling units in a fashion that would be different than what we currently are doing in the city. There's also a couple of options that the state has allowed for the communities that are affected by this regulation to have a couple choices related to the residency of a property owner, and also whether or not to allow or not allow the short-term rentals in accessory dwelling units. So I'm going to quickly go through my presentation. Ultimately, we're looking for direction from the council. We're going to give you a couple of options here and then see if you'd like to provide any additional direction. So happy to answer questions during the presentation or after, either one, whichever you prefer. So as background, House Bill 241152 was passed last year. It specifically related to accessory dwelling units, and the overall goal is to increase housing within the state of Colorado. The provisions in general made that a statewide interest in accessory dwelling units, so they basically have determined how we are going to have to allow for those with the regulations that they have put forward. It is a mandatory allowance for the cities that meet certain criteria. Longmont is one. If you're in an MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, which we are, and most of the larger communities in Colorado are, you'll have to follow these regulations. There are limited controls that we will be able to apply. The general thing to keep in mind is that the way these regulations are written is that any standards that are applied have to be measurable. An example of one that we usually run into problems with, and this happens, I would say, with most of the neighborhood groups, is whether or not a project is compatible. Compatible, how I determine it and how all of you may look at it, would probably yield 8 different results. And therefore, the state has basically said that that is something you cannot judge an accessory dwelling unit on. It must be measurable. So the setbacks and things that they have set forth and any of the regulations that we add or modify must be measurable. So just really quick, we have allowed ADUs in Longmont since 1996. The Wallace subdivision was the first subdivision that actually had those as an accessory use within their development. In 2001, when we combined the subdivision regulations, landscape regulations, zoning code into the land development code that we have today, we actually incorporated and allowed for accessory dwelling units starting in 2001. There were a number of restrictions, and as the years went by and we learned from council, hearing concerns from neighborhoods, we slowly and meticulously modified those regulations to where we're at today. Currently, in our regulations, we allow for both attached units, so in addition to your house that could have an accessory dwelling unit. We allow for detached, which could be in, for example, a detached structure, or taking an existing detached garage as an example and modifying that into a home. We also allow them in the basement. The map on the screen that you're looking at is a representation with dots of the locations of the existing accessory dwelling units in the city of Longmont. The permitted number that we have is 166. You can see in the key up in the left the numbers that have been permitted during certain time frames from basically a 5-year period starting in 2000 to 2004, the yellow, and then so on. And it shows the number of units that were permitted. And for those that are having a hard time seeing, the yellow dots, which started in 2000, we issued 49 permits. 2005 to 2009, we did 11 permits. 2010 to 2014, we did 22. 2015 to 2019, we did 38. And then 2020 to 2024, we did, my glasses are having a hard time. I think that says 46.
Yep.
So if you total those together, you should get 166. And then in the bottom right is a blow up of the Prospect development, because if you look at the location on the screen down here in the middle, it's a little hard to see where all those dots are. So we blew that up for you, and you can see in Prospect the numbers that were issued, again, in those same time frames. Those numbers are reflected in the totals on the left.
Thank you. Just to hone in on this, there are 94 ADUs in Prospect, and that represents more than half of the entire ADUs in the city.
Currently, yes.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Good to know. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So next, we've identified, based on the state requirements, what we need to modify in order to be in alignment with the requirements of the state that will take effect here in June 30th of this year. First is that we have to modify our process to make sure that it's an administrative process. So the easiest way to think about that is that there is no notice, there is no public process for an ADU. Think of it as that you want to pull a building permit to, say, finish your basement. There's no notice when you do that. You just meet the codes, you submit your application to the building department, they review it. If it meets the codes, they issue you the permit. That's the process that will be required for accessory dwelling units moving forward. The state said that we have to allow ADUs between 500 and 800 square feet. There are a few things that we can restrict on size based on the maximum size of a house. But again, they've dictated that we have to allow ADUs between 500 and 800 square feet. The rear setbacks we currently have for accessory dwelling units are 10 feet from the rear property line. Those we have to reduce to 5. The parking requirements, in general, we are actually more lenient than the state currently on their regulations, but just looking at some of their recommendations for when a parking space could be required, we are going to recommend that there be a couple of modifications to the standards. And specifically, think of it this way. If there's no parking on a property right now, and someone adds an accessory dwelling unit, then the code, or what the state is saying, is that you can require one. If there is no parking on the street, so there's no public parking on the street, you're going to add a unit, you can also require a parking space. So we're going to look at some parameters for, in certain unique situations, if we run into those, that we have the ability to require a space to make sure that we don't cause any kind of problems in the neighborhood. And then the last item that we need to modify is the city currently has in our accessory dwelling unit regulations the requirement that the owner of the property that has an accessory dwelling unit must live in one of the units on the property they own. They must live in either the primary or the accessory dwelling unit. If you do not, technically you are in violation of our regulations, and that's a problem. Under the state's changes, they do not require the owner to live there after the unit has been constructed. And that's one of the questions that we're going to be asking you here in a second, is whether or not we want to have a residency requirement in order to apply for the permit. The state has, the state has allowed for cities to actually require that you be living on the property that you make application for. And I think there's a reason of thinking that that way that would keep someone who's buying property from out of state or other outside the municipality from just buying it and then turning it into two rentals and not having any ownership of the property, at least not ownership in the sense of owning the property, but maybe ownership as a responsibility to the community. So those are the things that we are specifically going to be making changes to. So the council discretionary items, so we have two. The first is this residency requirement related again to whether or not they need to reside on the property in order to apply for the accessory dwelling unit. So your options are that it's okay, we don't need someone to live on the property to apply for it. It could be anyone, whether they live in the city of Longmont or not, or on that property. The other is that you could apply it if you like. And we'll come back to these after I finish. The second item, again, is related to short-term rentals. And there really are three options here. Allow STRs and ADUs without any restrictions. Allow STRs and ADUs if the owner resides in the primary unit, or prohibit STRs and ADUs, and that is the current city standard. We have a current policy in place that states that you are not allowed to use an accessory dwelling unit as a short-term rental. There are a few that were grandfathered in because the council made that change after we had originally set up the regulations. And so last count, there are approximately 6 that are non-conforming currently and grandfathered in. Yes.
I think we're going to wait until the end of the presentation.
Just to clarify.
Okay.
What is it, how does the city define short-term rental?
Any rental less than 30 days.
Less than 30 days, thank you.
Let's hold our questions until the end of this presentation. Write them down.
Okay. I only got, I think, 2 slides left. All right, next steps. So we're asking for council to provide us direction tonight. We'll give you those options here in just a second. And then either way, depending on which versions you choose, we will bring back an ordinance to amend, at least to make sure we are in conformance with the state regulations. And if council chooses to direct us on the other 2 items, then we'll include those. Depending on council's direction, our anticipated time to come back would be April, May of this year for adoption and review. And again, as a reminder, whether we finish on time or not, the regulations from the state take effect June 30th, 2025. So the options we have for you tonight is you can just direct staff to amend the land development code for compliance only with the regulations, or you could have us also address the 2 items that I went through regarding short-term rentals and the residency requirements. And we would hope that you would provide us direction on both of the items that are the council's discretion. And I have those available to look at here if you'd like, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Councilor McCoy?
No, that's me.
Councilor?
Next, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Can you go on the slide, and I lost track as we were moving through these, that's why I put my name in the queue right away. The one where we had the options for the short-term rentals, there were 3.
Sure.
It was allow without restrictions. So currently, we prohibit short-term rentals in the ADU.
Yes.
So, and then I see in our land code, it's section, what is it? It's in the accessory dwelling.
Yes.
Section
can
D,
speak to
the limit on sale, tenancy, and occupancy. So item 3, or DI, accessory dwelling units may be leased or rented for tenancies of less than 30 days as short-term rentals, only when the property owner is present. So does that mean that the property owner is residing in the main house and using the short-term rental? Like, I just wanted to know
Sure.
if this is contradicting language.
So without going too long, because it's getting late and I know you've got other items here, the short answer is that on the fly, we amended the ordinance for short-term rental here at the meeting. And when we did, originally we allowed them in there. And so we didn't have time to identify and find any conflicts. That section was left in code and has caused a number of people consternation because
Yeah.
it's still in there saying
Yeah.
it's allowed, but the short-term rental restrictions were adopted after that section of code and trump the allowance in there. So currently, no ADUs can be used for short-term rentals.
Okay, so, but ADUs can be used in the main house? Am I understanding that correctly, or not at all?
And I think you mean short-term rental.
Short-term rentals, sorry, short-term rentals. It is getting late. So short-term rentals can be used for the main house.
So that-
And, yeah, help me out here.
Just a second. I was looking at that earlier, and my recollection, and I might have to step aside here for a second, and Jeremy's probably checking too, is that my recollection is that in the primary home, you can do a short-term rental. You just cannot use the accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, it almost seems like
And you
it
have
should be
to, I
reversed.
believe it also says, you have to reside, that has
Yes.
to be your primary residence. So you can't live in the accessory dwelling unit and then treat the principal as a short-term rental. You have to live in the primary residence and you can rent out that unit. So an example, I have a house. I have a detached accessory dwelling unit. I live in my house for 6 months out of the year in Colorado, and in the winter, I snowbird to Arizona. I could short-term rental my house because that's my primary residence, but I cannot short-term rental the accessory dwelling unit.
So that would sit vacant.
That
Or
would
you'd
be,
have a long
I would have a
per-
long-term rent, or
Right.
at least month to month, in order not to fall into the
Got it.
the definition for short-term rental.
Okay, okay, I just want to make sure that any option we choose, that one, it doesn't contradict existing code, and we don't create an unintended consequence that just convolutes
Part of our
our situation.
Part of our revisions, based on the direction you give, will be to make sure that there are not. And that's why we want to do it now instead of
Yeah.
in the public hearing.
Yeah.
If I can jump in to make it a little bit more complicated, especially when you're looking at this section, I think how that relates to the strategy that you want to use for housing is something that council would need to keep in mind, because if you're looking at growing housing stock, you would want to look at more long-term rentals versus short-term rentals, because in the ADU world, from a housing perspective, and you're looking at affordable rental opportunities, you're going to want more of a long-term rental to help on the housing side as we look at affordable and attainable housing, because short-term rentals don't necessarily solve that gap from a housing component. So there's a different lens that comes into this question.
And I guess my concern with totally prohibiting these, so I think about in the case of the Superior Fire, where people were displaced from their home, but, maybe they just needed a space for, 3 to 4 weeks, little under a month. Just having those options available is just, I'm just throwing thoughts out there, but, no, I understand. So thank you for that.
Were you next, Councilman McCoy? I thought so. Whoops.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Don, just to give you some direction from my perspective, I do think, there's some merit to your option number 1, residency requirement for when they're applying. I think that was the spirit of the law, and it allows people to also have a decision where, 5 years from now, they can buy a different house and still hang on to both the ADU and their previous residence and rent that. And I think that is what the spirit of it is about. So just so you have some direction from my perspective. And I think others were just as confused at first there about, and if you can go back to the slide where it's that middle option, they're allowing short-term rentals in ADUs only if owner resides in the primary unit, is what you just described to Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring. And that, am I correct in that?
So my example is the way it currently is, of that it's not allowed in the accessory dwelling unit.
Oh, okay.
You could.
The snowbird example
Yes.
is what you were saying.
Yes, but you could allow it if you wanted to in the accessory dwelling units. But then, as Harold was talking about, does that go counter to the housing policy that maybe this council has?
Okay.
Of taking off a unit that could be a longer term rental option at a cheaper price for a month to month than something that's rented 3 or 4 days throughout a month that may generate more money for the homeowner.
Okay, so now that's as clear as mud.
Sorry.
So that would not be option 2 on this screen here, or
So currently, our current regulations, you cannot, I'm going to cough again, sorry. Under our current regulations, you cannot use an accessory dwelling unit as a short-term rental.
right, and I understand that. So, and I'm supportive of that.
And so an option is that the council could allow them in the accessory dwelling unit. And one of the options would be if the owner resides in it, versus I own a property with 2 units because I already got my permit and I bought my other house now and I've left. Can I rent one of those as a short-term rental?
Right, and the answer is no, right? Am I understanding that right?
We allow currently in the short. I'm sorry, been talking too much. That's my beeper. We currently allow people who live in the city of Longmont, residents, to own another property in Longmont and to request that that other property be a short-term rental. So they are allowed to have other properties, thank you, that are short-term rentals. So I don't have to have a short-term rental on a property that I live at. I could have it somewhere else in Longmont, but I must live in Longmont is the current regulation.
Yes.
Okay. So giving you my opinion in regards to the first part does not necessarily address this issue here. Did you need both?
So
Yes.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So I think the middle option is probably the best option for trying to address, let me read this.
So
Never mind.
So Council-
I'm just giving you the first one. I'm
Sure.
got to think about this.
And just so the
confusing.
council understands, if you're not comfortable making a decision on the short-term rentals, because it is a big issue, we could bring something else back. We do not have to have that decision tonight. This is definitely an option. I just wanted to let you know it's an option. And if you want to pursue it and you want us to bring it back and just discuss that item, we could do that. If you're comfortable with the other about the residency, yes or no, let us know. And then we can bring that back in the ordinance that is going to change the accessory dwelling unit regulations to meet the state regulations. So we just want to let you know, you have some options.
Okay.
If you're comfortable, great. If not, you want to tell us to come back with more info, we're happy to do that too.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Thank you, Dawn, for your presentation. These comments are more for the courtesy of my colleagues on City Council. Considering the options in front of us tonight, I am in favor of requiring that if you are going to build one, I mean, obviously, I know that after it's built, then the residency requirement goes away. But to build one, I firmly believe that you should be inherently invested in the community and as such as a resident. So I would vote in that way on option 1, or item 1, if you will. On item 2, when we talk about short-term vacation rentals, I know not every member of council was on the council that last dealt with that. I don't actually think that many of us were, to be honest with you. I was on that council, and I would say that the House or the state legislation inherently, I think, or inherently suggests that they are not looking for accessory dwelling units to be used as short-term rentals. Because they were looking at this as some sort of mechanism to address housing shortages. I'm not for massive short-term vacation rental availability. I was very much for strict regulation, and in this case, I'm still for strict regulation of short-term vacation rentals. So I would prefer, and I will vote accordingly, to leave our current regulations in place concerning short-term vacation rentals and accessory dwelling units. And so those are my two, and I will vote that way, and that's why my comments are meant for my colleagues more so than staff. Thank you.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Councilor Pumpkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I largely agree with my colleague, Councilmember Rodriguez over there. I think if this is going to be a piece of the pie that addresses some of the housing challenges we face, continuing the standard of prohibiting short-term rentals and ADUs is the way to go here for now. There are other cities that have been overrun by short-term rentals and are trying to course correct. And I think it's probably helped that the city has been a little bit ahead of the game in that way, to allow for a more diverse housing supply here. So I would certainly support prohibiting short-term rentals, at least for now, in ADUs, which is our current policy on that. And then if we go to decision number 1, I think I would also support the residency requirement in place here. I'd be open to, if we wanted to get a little bit more nuanced, allowing the ADU to still exist in the property owner's and used as a long-term rental property, as long as the the property owner still resided in Longmont, to kind of keep the investment in Longmont. But if that's not a part of the piece that we want to consider at this point, I would certainly at a minimum want to require residency residency on the property before applying. There's one other direction that I wanted to explore here with staff, and Don, I sent you some of these questions in advance, and you've addressed some of them in the presentation already, so I appreciate that, and we'll skip some of those for the sake of time. Page 11 of House Bill 24-1152 states that municipalities shall allow, quote, subject to an administrative approval process, end quote, 1 ADU as an accessory to a single unit detached dwelling. And so I guess I wanted to clarify two things here. When the legislation says, quote, administrative approval process, what does that entail from staff's perspective, and like what is the current, and how would that compare to the current process for ADU approval?
So up on the screen, we've got a couple flow charts. So the blue, dark blue to black on the left and center show our two current processes for handling accessory dwelling unit applications that come in for review. And the green would reflect the standard that the state is setting up. The time frames or estimates that I've included, just to give you an idea of really what they're looking at from a savings of time, at least under our current processes. So as an example, any basement conversion into to another unit in your house, or if you have a large house that's a ranch or 2-story and you wanted to convert one of those floors into an accessory dwelling unit, you would submit an application to us. It would go to the DRC managers meeting that we have every 2 weeks. We confirm that you meet the standards that are in the code currently, and if you meet those standards, we approve it, and then you're eligible to go to building permit. If you do a minor addition to your house that is under 25% of the current square footage of the house, you can also do that same process. So that would be an example of our current administrative process. If you are building a brand new structure, either attached to your home that is greater than 25% of the current square footage of the house. So I have a 1,000 square foot house. I want to add 500 square feet. You've got to go through the center process. I want to build a separate detached unit in my big backyard because I got a nice big lot and I want a separate unit back there that I can rent out. Then you would go through this center portion. You would come in and meet with us at a pre-application meeting where we would have staff from all the various departments. We would answer your questions, talk to you about the process, explain to you what we need you to submit, talk about the fees, and then you would make an application. Once you've got that information from your architect or engineer, the DRC would review it. Assuming everything meets code, then we would go ahead and we would issue you an approval letter and you would apply for your building permit. The building permit could happen at the same time as the review, but mostly people wait until they know for sure that there's no changes before they submit. And then under the state's process in the green, we will have a checklist. We will have an application form that defines every standard that you will have to meet in order to be approved for that accessory dwelling unit. You will turn it into building inspection. They will route it to the various reviewers, which will include planning staff, public works, power, drainage, to make sure that we're not causing or doing anything to harm anyone and that it meets our standards. We would sign off on that. If it does, they would be issued their building permit. That would be the differences.
So then is, actually, before I clarify the state's process, is there any kind of like site plan review that happens under this DRC approval process currently?
Yes, that's through the DRC.
Okay.
So you submit a site plan with your application that shows the location of any addition or the new structure that you want to build. We check it for setbacks. We check it for drainage. You show us where your utilities are going. We confirm there's no conflicts.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that would be separate from the building review process. So in the state, in this green process here, is there a site plan review that kind of gets baked into that now through a checklist format?
Yes. Yes. So we will have specific standards that will be stated on that application. So as long as the design professional is using that checklist and providing the right types of drawings with the appropriate information on them that it's told that you need to have on it, it's a yes or no review. Do they provide adequate drainage? Yes. Do they meet setbacks? Yes. Do you, that's how that would work.
It'll be somewhat similar to, though not identical to, like I had to submit a form for a chicken coop. And like that was a checklist that it had to be 6 feet from adjacent fences and from the main structure. Obviously, this is probably built to a different standard than my chicken coop was.
Yes.
That we had excellent insulation put in. And they appreciate it right now. But so this process here is going to bake in kind of just check the box, like make sure it checks the boxes for all of the requirements that it has to meet.
Yes.
Site plan gets put into that process. And is this what every locality now has to follow, or is this what Longmont is following as a result of the state?
So if they agree with our interpretation of the legislation, their process should look just like this, yes.
In green.
Yes,
That's
in
what it's
green.
going to shift to. So
Yes.
ultimately, through this process as well, is a benefit is it is streamlining the review process.
Yes.
And some of the things that maybe you would have done in the DRC discussion get kind of baked into this permit approval.
Yeah, the other thing that I would point out without hopefully adding too much time to your discussion is that, and I've stated this before, is that the councils past have always felt that educating and letting the neighborhoods and the adjacent property owners know what's going on a parcel next to them was very important. In other words, getting out information and have people have the ability to understand what's happening in their neighborhood. And so the decision to make the middle flow chart was specific and was aimed at making sure that people knew what was happening in their neighborhood and giving them the ability to understand it. There was no ability for them to appeal any decision that was made. And unfortunately, some of you may have gotten calls previously in the past of, hey, I got a notice and I don't want this, but it's allowed. But we were letting them know, and that was the direction we were given from council, was we want folks to know. They needed to post a sign that they're doing a development application through our process. We had to do mailings to the adjacent property owners, and then we took feedback from the neighbors, and we would see if anything that they may have mentioned was a code requirement that we were not aware of or missed, to make sure that we were following all the rules.
Is that process of like neighborhood engagement or communication baked into this?
It is
process?
forbade under the regulations. There is no ability to do that now under the state regulations. There is no appeal process. You cannot require them to go before any elected or appointed board for any kind of review, period. They meet the standard or they do not.
Is there an opportunity under state law here for, and if you don't know the answer to this question, this is not one of the ones I said in advance, but if you need time, you'll have time to look at this. But for free-range chickens in Longmont, you actually need to get neighbor signatures from adjacent properties, I believe.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Is that something that would be forbidden
Yes.
under state law?
Yes, it
Any
would.
kind of just signature or just of awareness? I was informed on this.
This basically becomes a use by right for any single family home. They have the right to come in and request that permit to be able to construct if they meet those regulations.
Great.
And the other significant change doesn't have anything to do with council. Also does not let homeowners associations prohibit ADUs.
Yep.
And so when you think about where are ADUs,
Yeah.
a lot of HOAs prohibit ADUs. So that's why you see it in certain pockets. This,
Yeah.
that is the other piece to this that has nothing to do with council, but means no matter where you live, you have the right to do this.
The Prospect has an HOA, if I recall correctly.
They do,
They
and
allow it.
but the PUD allowed it.
The PUD
But
allowed
as an
it.
example,
Right.
my subdivision has specific language that says I cannot have another dwelling unit on my property. The state law now says I have the ability to make that and build one if I wanted to, as long as I meet the regulations.
Got it. So as a result of the state law, this is effectively enabling more ADUs to be built. Longmont's going to create a process and make a few decisions here, as my fellow council members have indicated, as to kind of what we want to prioritize in this and what we want to emphasize. My last question for you is, let's say I have a basement ADU, so an interior or basement one. Does this prohibit me from also having a non-attached ADU, or is this just establishing a floor minimum at least one?
So
Time's up.
He can answer.
Yeah, no response.
It's fine.
So there's a lot in there. So let's just kind of walk through this. The state regulation states that any property that is a single family property is allowed at least one ADU. Our regulations currently restrict ADUs to only one per lot. If council wanted to allow multiple ADUs, there's nothing in the regulations that the state put forward that would preclude you from doing that. You could say Longmont's going to allow 2 ADUs on every single family lot. You would have that ability to do it. But if you currently have an ADU with your existing single family home, you do not get another one unless the council were to decide we're going to allow multiple. And we're not recommending that.
Thank you.
Mr. Burchett, I'm just going to weigh in mostly. For your number one question, I'm in favor of B, which a residency is required. And on your second question, just to clarify, a short-term rental is less than 30 days, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if you keep somebody for 31 days, that's a regular rental. So I'm in favor of number 3, to prohibit them for now. But you are living in close proximity, so sometimes there needs to be a little wiggle room with tenants. Okay, and then I have another question. You said that the state allows between 500 and 800 feet. Is there an 800-foot limit for this short process? Or if you have a mansion, can you have like a regular-sized house as an ADU?
So under our current regulations, we restrict you to your accessory dwelling unit being no bigger than half of the finished floor area of your current home. So if you happen to live on a
10,000
half an
square foot, yeah.
half an acre lot, which there are some in Longmont, they're say 10,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a 2,800 square foot house that's finished. That's all my finished floor area. You technically could have a 1,400 square foot accessory dwelling unit in your backyard, which would be about a ranch style home that was built in the 70s. Yes, that would be, that currently under Longmont's regulations, that would be allowed. Anyone who so far has looked at that and has tried that after they've done the math has not been able to make it work yet financially. So because we have had a couple that have tried to come through and then they've walked away. They can't make it. I think they figured out how much it actually costs to construct it and what they could run it for, and they couldn't make it work. Doesn't mean that someone else couldn't, but to your point, yes, if you have a very large house, you could have, under our current regulations, a very large ADU. And right now, I don't know that unless council were to tell us that that's a concern, that we would want to change that standard to allow people to be able to still build up to half of the size of theirs, which would allow for greater than an 800 square foot ADU.
So these size limits are kind of minimums, if you will.
It's the range we must allow in the regulations. And so we will need to make sure that we put in, for example, if you have a 1,000 square foot house currently, say in Old Town, which would not be unheard of, we have to allow for a 500 to 800 square foot accessory dwelling unit. Under our current regulations, you'd be limited in a 1,000 square foot house to 500 square feet. So we have to at least allow them to go up to 800 if they wanted to. So there will be some modifications, but we still feel that having the ability for folks to have some flexibility is still a good thing.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think the other side of the equation is if they could build a 1,200 square foot ADU, this is what the state's mandating is 500 to 800. The 1,200 would go through our other process, or would it go through this?
It would still go through there, through the new process. It would still be an over-the-counter permit. We have the ability under the regulations to go and allow less than 500, which we would if someone had an 800 square foot house, we would allow them to build a 400 square foot ADU, which is more in line with what you would see on a detached 2-car garage size of a structure. And we're allowed to go more if we want to under the state regulations.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So let's go through this and everybody just weigh in so we give direction and as concise direction. We'll start with Councilor Yarbrough. The first one would be to direct staff to proceed with the amendments to the LDC to be in compliance with House Bill 241152. Yes. Okay. And residency requirement, where the property owner resides on the parcel when an application is submitted for an ADU, yeah. And short-term rentals, stick with what we have now, none allowed, okay. And you gave your update, okay.
Okay, thank you. So with the residency requirement, yes, I agree that the property, there should be required residency before applying. And the second one with the short-term rentals, yeah, we'll just stick with the current city standard for now.
Okay. Councilor Christ.
1B, require residency before applying. And in the second question, 3. So number 2, but the third option, prohibit STRs and SDUs, the current city standard.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. And I want to thank Councilmember Rodriguez. It was that I was getting a little confused there, and I want to thank you because I agree with you on both counts there about option 1 and about the prohibiting short-term rentals on ADUs, our current standard.
Councilor Popkin.
Require residency and stick to the current city standard.
I agree with all of them.
I can be short too.
Awesome. Excellent.
Number 2, and yeah, residency and short-term.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you. That was a lot of questions.
You guys have a great night.
Thank you.
And
We're-
you're going to be adjusting those contradictory language? Thank you.
All right, we are now on the last presentation, which is to request authorization to pursue legal action against Golden Triangle Construction, Inc. concerning a breach of contract for construction at the museum and police storage facility. And we have Joni Marsh, Assistant City Manager.
Mayor Peck, members of council, thank you for your time. I have a very brief presentation. The staff report encapsulated the details of the request before you this evening. We are talking about one of our city facilities, Museum Police and Storage, which is out by the shooting range in Weld County. This building was completed in 2018. In 2023, staff encountered water and some roof membranes that were separating. We've since done a series of investigative work to look through how to fix that. We know that the repair costs for that roof could exceed $800,000. After taking a look at all of our options, we are requesting that council authorize us to file civil action in court. And with that, if you have any questions, Eugene and I are here to respond.
Are there any questions from councilors or discussion? I think that it was really given to us in a very good presentation already, in a very good discussion in executive session. So thank you. It looks like we understand. So we need to make do we need to make a motion here to give authorization for them to? Okay, I move that we give authorization to our city staff to pursue legal action against Golden Triangle per Construction, Inc., concerning the breach of contract for construction at the museum.
Oh, sorry, second.
And storage facility. I'll say, okay. It's been moved by myself, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring to give authorization to council to pursue legal action. All those, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Or what? We are now at the 2025 legislative bills recommended for City Council.
Thank you, Mayor. Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. I'm back with one bill today, Senate Bill 25-117, concerning the reduction of transportation costs. This essentially is kind of a cost reduction bill on the state side, repealing some of the fees that currently we get a portion of for some of our transportation funding. So the bill would reduce that funding for transportation projects across Colorado, would negatively affect air quality over time, effectively reversing many of the policy directives that the City Council has supported over the years. Since transportation is a priority for the City Council work plan, and the bill would negatively affect that progress, staff recommends Council oppose Senate Bill 25-117.
I move that we oppose Senate Bill 25-117.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor McCoy and seconded by myself that we oppose Senate Bill 25-117. Any discussion? Councilor Christ.
So you all know I'm in favor of transportation solutions, but I read this a bit differently than most. For one, in economics, there's a lot of paradoxes, and recently in the news has been Jevons paradox, which is about technological advancements that lead to greater use. But also there's the Laffer curve, which cutting back on certain fees, and I'm just quoting what's in here, certain fees on fuel and fees on booked passenger rides. And so that kind of reduction in fees can often lead to bigger revenues. In other words, it might help us keep Ride Longmont more affordable. So I believe just the way this is written, that the people who are promoting it may have done more research on the cost effectiveness of the fees that they're getting versus the potential for expansion of rideshare and other transportation solutions. So just the specificity on certain fees. So I think it might be fairly benign, and so I would like to support it.
And Councilmember Christ, you had asked who it is that's sponsoring this bill, and I wrote you back, but it was during the meeting. So
thank you.
This is actually Senator Bright from Platteville that proposed it. And as far as I could see, he's the only Senate sponsor at this time.
Okay.
Seeing no other questions in the queue, let's vote. So that passed 6-1 with Councilor Christ opposing.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We are now at final call, public invited to be heard. Is there anybody in the chamber that would like to address the council?
Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. Just notes I took. This is about that first talk on electrification. So there is no path to net zero emissions by any practical way we have today with technology. Such a suggestion is floated to the public is a massive disservice to the truth. There is also no green energy transition occurring. That's not my opinion. You can go very easily to our World in Data, look it up. If you have any questions or disagree with me, I'd be happy to point you to that. All electric does not mean CO2 free. It's because of the inescapable truths of mining and refining. You have to move a lot of rock, crush a lot of rock, transport it, and such. And so it's like electric cars. You release it in the beginning and get it at the end. The United States accounts for about 15% of global emissions. Colorado, if my recollection of populations nationally and locally are correct, that's about 1.25% of U.S. emissions. So electricity is about 20% of all CO2 emissions, and so you start getting down to smaller and smaller numbers here. And if we care about making life affordable to residents of Longmont, we as a city should really push back as strongly as we can against the state on some of these things. Yeah, it's anywhere, any city, state, country that has added wind and solar to their generation portfolio, electricity costs rise substantially. There's a relationship, a clear relationship. So for essentially negligible gain, we're going to increase the cost of living here dramatically. There's unintended consequences. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Remodeling will slow down, or if we pass these code changes, because people won't remodel their house if it gets too expensive, and so you'll end up with more houses that are not remodeled where maybe people wanted to. Let's see, all electric won't be cheaper. Gas is cheaper now, I saw this the other day, than it was, I think it was 20 years ago. And so that was kind of interesting. Councilwoman Chris mentioned Jevons paradox. That deals with efficiencies, and so you can make the per unit items more efficient, but it creates more energy use of the things that you're making more efficient. And so I encourage you to look this up. Again, this is not my opinion. This is true, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about any of this, but I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Come on.
Every time I come up.
Oh. I wonder why.
Terry Moore, Three Birds Place. I would like to echo everything he said. Is very good. I want to remind the council that Texas had a lot of wind and solar. And look what it did for them a couple of years ago when they had a big freeze down there. We live several degrees north in latitude and 5,000 feet higher. So I don't think this is a good idea. I live in an all-electric building, and it's just a mess. We have to run a wood stove to compensate, and that's not helping anything. It has, matter of fact, it has the opposite effect. And this is all because there's no gas there. Gas is cheap, and you burn the methane. And if you want less CO2, why not plant more trees than what we've been doing? This to me is ludicrous, and it is insane. I don't like cohort and things like them, like a regional council of governments, because that's being pushed by the UN. And remember those strings I talked about? Any money that comes from those is going to have strings, whether you get it now or you get it later. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening again. Steve Altshuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. I would like to tell you of one of my superpowers. It's the ability to look at things differently than a lot of other people are able to look at. Doesn't mean I'm always right, but I do have a different perspective. I accidentally touched on it last week, and between the city manager and the lawyer here, maybe people can put their heads together and come to a solution. As I said last week, the first condo I owned was an apartment conversion. It had been apartments for, 15, 20 years, and it was a really large one. There were like 5 or 6, well, there were a whole bunch of like townhouses, but then also a 3-story apartment building that I was in, and they were all converted to condos. So if you have this law about the condos, I forget the exact term of it, where the builder's responsible for 10 years. If you take an apartment building, and you can call a realtor, you can put out flyers to the owners of these apartment buildings saying, would you be interested in selling, and work with the owner to convert it to condos and sell it to individual people. I don't know if you would need the apartment building to be at least 10 years old, or if it could be 2 years old and then converted to condos, and so now it doesn't matter because it wasn't built as a condo. So there's details like that that I don't know that could be worked out. But I'm sure there's going to be some builders out there that would be more than happy to sell their apartment building. It doesn't have to be sold to the city, but the city can work with the builder, do the conversion. You've got, every unit has individual gas, individual electric, individual water, and start getting condos that are, my first condo was 600 square feet. So you can get something that's $150,000 to $200,000 nowadays that somebody can own, and they can start getting into the real estate market. So there's a lot of ways of massaging it, but I think it's worth looking into, having a conversation about, and see if it's something that would be doable to help with that medium range market that we were all talking about. Okay, so that said, I didn't know everything that was going on tonight, but I already mentioned the Trump executive order about no ban on gas appliances. So I've mentioned before, I think going all electric is basically ridiculous. Electric costs 4 times more than gas. So in the long run, the people that are living in these all-electric homes are going to be spending a lot more money. And you keep saying that people can't afford to live here, and you're increasing their cost. Yes, the builder will save a little bit by not putting in gas on the front side, but on the back side, the people living there will be spending more and more. And when it's cold like it is now, and you have a brownout or a blackout, and the electricity is not working, you're going to have people freezing to death in their units because there's no alternative energy source. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, no, you've already spoken.
I just want my pen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, donation. Seeing no one else that is speaking at final call, public invited to be heard, we are now at mayor and council comments. Seeing no one on council, oh, well, that was fast.
I just wanted to address the graffiti and vandalism that happened down on around 6th and Main. And I just want to say that we need to all treat each other as neighbors. There's really no space for hate in our city, in the city of Longmont. And then also to the people that experience this, that there's a graffiti cleanup group through the city. So please get with the city to get some help with that.
Thank you. Any other? City manager remarks.
2 things, Mayor, Council. One, Council asked if that was cleaned up, and to the best of our knowledge, they were out there pretty fast, within a day or so, cleaning that up. So I wanted to let you know on the timing on that. Also wanted to give you some good news. When we funded HousePad, we talked about we were going to continue to try to get additional funding for that. And the State Housing Board approved today an additional $770,000 to go to that project, which reduces the city contribution that we presented as part of the original numbers. So I just wanted to let you know that was something that we got for this project as well.
Great, that's great news. City attorney.
No comments, Mayor.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Chris, that we adjourned. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
So why is it doing that, Dawn?